Hi there, Martin. It's lovely to speak to you. How are you today?
How are you doing?
Good, good. Yeah, I'm just watching. The sun's just come out. We tend to get the Mediterranean weather now a little bit, where the sun comes out.
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice today, definitely.
Beautiful. Okay, then. So I found you on Facebook, and I think somebody sent me your a message with you sitting there reading something to the general public to explain about the mask and exemptions, all sorts of stuff. But before we get into that, I'm really, really interested to find out who you are, a little bit about you, and how did you wake up to all of this stuff? So if you don't mind filling me in a little. Thanks.
My name's Martin. I live in Hampshire. Background: I'm a plumber, which can cause a lot of issues amongst debates because people say, "Oh, what a plumber knows more than a doctor, does they?" And it's always a varied discussion amongst people for that. When it comes to people, the terms woke and awake and stuff like that, I don't really associate myself with those types of terms. I've always grown up my entire life, always questioning things, always being a critical thinker. If someone says something to me, my brain automatically questions why. Is there a better option? Why am I being told that? So there wasn't a time in my life where I thought, now things start to make sense. But as I grew up from a child into adolescence and into adulthood, the thing that really made me question was 9/11. I was early 20s, I believe, 2001, so 19 years ago. So yeah, early 20s I was, and it really made me question what was going on there. And then from there, just started digging around into other bits and bobs and JFK, moon landings, even stuff about flat Earth, etc. Always a nice topic that people think you're crazy to think about. And then from that, it's kind of one big jigsaw. It's all part of the same jigsaw puzzle, and all the pieces fit, but you have to just make them fit together. And then obviously when this coronavirus stuff started coming out, it's again another part of the jigsaw, but this is more important now. It affects the whole world. Whereas like 9/11 didn't affect me personally. Whether the world's round or flat, I don't really care. JFK, again, nothing to do with me. Moon landings, I don't really care. But this now has got to the point where it's affecting my life. So that's why I need to kind of step in and talk more about stuff. So that's where I am today, basically.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. I think a lot of people are feeling that now. Is that the shock of what's happened to us, the way they locked us down. I've been doing a huge amount of research myself and figuring out stuff. I never thought it was going to get to this level, but it has. So anyway, what I really want to talk to you today about is the letter you have, or the list, where you can explain to people exactly, first of all, where did you get it from? Where did you get this list?
It's on the government website. You just go to .gov.uk. I will send you a link, and I'm sure you can put it in the link to the video. It's on the government website. It's their own legislation, so it's not like it's found from the media or some mistrusted source, but not that we trust the government. But it's on the government's own website. It's their own legislation, so it's there in black and white for you to read for yourself.
Okay, because from what I know as well, there's a lot on the government website. There was stuff on the government website in March that told us that this virus was not contagious, and yet people still question all of this. It's all out there, and yet they won't go on there and check it out, which is really strange. Okay, then, so can you tell us a little bit about what's in there, and how does this help people? If you want to explain it in some way.
Yeah, sure. The thing that's obviously affects everybody is everyone's being told, blanket statement, wearing face masks in public is law. Now that's what's being pushed by the media, that's what's being pushed onto the shops, and then the employees then pushing onto you, the customer. It's just not true, it's not law. Now the definition of law, acts, legislation, statutes, it's all complicated. I don't get too much into it, but basically all law states is no harm, no injury, no loss, no fraud, and no breach of the peace. That's all law is. From that, you can make acts, legislation, statutes, etc. But this does not form into law. Law has to be passed through both Houses of Parliament, the Houses of Law, House of Commons, then it receives royal assent. Now there's first readings, second readings, other bits and bobs, third readings in both of the houses, then it's passed as law. However, this didn't go through that procedure.
Sorry to stop you there. That's really interesting, because a couple of years ago, this ties in. I was training, and that is exactly true. It takes quite a while for something to become a law. So thank you for that. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah.
If you look on here, actually, it says, it's actually on the legislation, this is printed off the internet, so it's not my own words, but it says this legislation was written at 9 a.m. on the 23rd of July. It was laid before Parliament at 1:15 p.m. on the 23rd of July, and then came into force 11 hours later. There's no way on this planet can that run through House of Lords, House of Commons, all different readings, all the different people in 11 hours. It's just not possible.
Right.
That's one. It's written there in black and white. It's not law.
So already this is illegal. It's not a proper law already.
Well, there's a difference between lawful and legal. A lot of people blanket statement, they say law, and you have to kind of push away and realise there's a difference between legislation and law. This is legislation, however, it's not law. There's a difference between the two.
Can you explain that for us?
Basically, yeah, it's no harm, no injury, no loss, no fraud, and no breach of the peace. That's all law is. So, for example, not wearing a seatbelt. There's no harm, there's no injury, there's no loss, there's no fraud. It's not unlawful not to wear your seatbelt. It might be illegal, but it's not unlawful. Now, if it's not unlawful, police can't arrest you. Police cannot arrest you for anything that's not unlawful. So you can't be arrested for not wearing your seatbelt. Not wearing your seatbelt comes under like the Road Traffic Act or something like that. But it's legality and legislation rather than law. So, but the police like to bully you into thinking it is law. And the problem as well is the police officers 9 times out of 10 don't have a clue what they're talking about either. If you look at...
police cannot arrest you then if you don't wear a mask, because is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they know they can't.
News. People need to know that.
Yeah, that's the problem. Police can only arrest you if you commit a crime, which is law. Like I said, no injury, no loss, no fraud, and no harm. This isn't a law, so you can't be arrested for it. Even in the legislation itself, it says that all they can do is direct you to wear a face covering or direct you to leave the store. There's nothing in there about the powers of arrest, because deep down the government know they can't arrest you for it. Now, the police will probably try and bully you, scare you into thinking they can arrest you. But when it really comes down to it, people know what they're talking about, they cannot slap cuffs on you, because you could then get them done for kidnap and false imprisonment.
Fantastic, because I've got people that are saying they're really, really scared not to wear a mask because they're going to get fined. So you're saying there's no way that they can do this. They cannot be fined.
A fine is different. It is in the legislation they can fine you.
They can fine you.
It is in the legislation, but there's so many loopholes, and there's so many, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a minute, there's so many loopholes in here that basically makes every single person in England not needing to wear a face mask, because every single exemption is applicable to every single person out there. It's just whether or not you stand up for yourself and whether or not you make it clear about your exemptions. You don't get bullied by the security guard at Tesco's. You don't get bullied by the manager. It's a problem. People don't know what they talk about. So when someone says, wear a mask, follow the arrows, do this, do that, people just blindly comply. And people need to start understanding laws, legislation, and what rights they have, rather than just blindly complying and blindly following the herd.
Okay, so what are people's rights then? Can you explain it?
There's a few things in here. I've got this, and it stays in my vehicle in case I'm ever questioned on it, although I do know this at the back of my hand. But if we look at second page under section 2, it talks about the interpretation, basically, what different words mean, so you can be clear. Now, the definition of face covering, again, this is all on their legislation. They have made this. The definition of face covering is, face covering means a covering of any type which covers a person's nose and mouth. That is it. That's all it says. It doesn't say a mask. It says a covering of any type. Now, if I want to be pedantic, that is covering my nose and mouth. Now, you might say,
like that.
yeah, you might say I'm being silly by saying that, but that's what they have written in the legislation. They could have written, it must be an N95 mask, it must be a surgical mask, it must cover the nose and mouth, be made of cloth, it must be hung around your ears. But they don't. They just say a covering of any type which covers the nose and mouth. So you could just use your hand, you could use your t-shirt. So that's one thing there. If you wanted to be a smart aleck, if you like, and say that's what it says. But that's the problem. People are going around wearing masks, but nowhere in any of the legislation says you must wear a mask. It just says a covering of any type.
Okay. Thank you for that, Martin. Are you sure there's not any more papers anywhere that they can get away with, where they're actually saying that you've got to wear a mask? This is it, is it?
No. Well, as far as I can tell, obviously, but this is their legislation. I'm glad they brought it out, actually, because it enabled me to look at it rather than them just saying this is applicable, this is legality, this is law. They've made this legislation, so it's there for me to read and abide by, because you can just abide by all this and get away without wearing a mask. So
I believe you 100%, because I did see another lawyer on Facebook the other night, and she explained similar. She said you could wear a scarf, you can wear anything. You don't have, as you said, you can just put your hands. That's brilliant. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
You need to understand. You don't have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Doesn't say it anywhere.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. What else can you tell us?
In part 2, because the legislation is called the Health Protection (open brackets) Coronavirus Wearing of Face Coverings in a Relevant Place close brackets Regulations 2020. So if you look at the word in there, it says face coverings in a relevant place. So then you need to know, what does relevant place mean? So relevant place then goes on to talk about which places you have to wear a mask and which places you don't. So the places you do have to wear a mask, or sorry, a covering, is basically a shop. A shop, but does not include restaurants with table service, does not include bars, does not include hotels, does not include pubs. I don't know why they've included pub as a shop, but they have anyway. So anyway, a shop, enclosed shopping centres, banks, building societies, post offices and pharmacies. They're the only places you have to wear a face covering.
Now that is ridiculous. In a pharmacy, you do have to, you don't, or you do, sorry.
You do have to wear them in a shop or shopping centre, banks, post offices and pharmacies. They're the only places that you need to wear a face covering. Everything else, there's even a list that goes on to tell you the places that you don't need to wear them, and it talks about libraries, theatres, museums, nightclubs, dance halls, but these at the moment are pretty irrelevant because none of them are open. However, the ones that are relevant talks about hairdressers. You do not need to wear them in a hairdresser, and a lot of we're seeing it already that hairdressers are telling people to wear them, but it's in here, it's saying you do not need to wear them.
I see hairdressers which they wear these shields. I mean, they're not only masks. I mean, it's gone completely crazy. But you don't, but in the pharmacy, you know, that I don't get that, because if someone goes into a pharmacy, they might go in there to check out if there's something wrong with them. How this doesn't make any sense.
I know what you mean, but then again, none of this, to my knowledge, makes any sense anyway. The reason it says pharmacies is because it says you have any exemptions not to wear them in, it says, providing wholly or mainly medical or dental services, i.e. a dentist or hospital, you do not need to wear masks, but you're seeing that being pushed to wear them. You do not need to.
How can you have any dental treatment with a mask? Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's what makes it even more laughable.
It's confusing people, aren't they, Martin? I think the whole point behind it. So we're very lucky to have someone like you. So carry on explaining it, because whoever watches this, they can get a clear idea, and they can get, we'll tell them where to get the papers as well, so they know.
Yeah.
Right. Carry on explaining. Thank you.
So they're the places that you have to wear them and don't have to wear them. But again, that just pertains to a face covering rather than an actual mask. The science behind mask wearing, we don't really need to touch on, but I think it's relevant that they don't say a mask, because the government give themselves a way to get out of it by saying, if you want to wear a mask and collapse because you're not breathing in the right amount of oxygen, that's your fault because we never told you to wear one. So that's that's their get out of jail free card, basically.
That's amazing. So people, people need to know this, as you say, because masks will make you sick. You can't breathe.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of cases of people running with masks on and having heart attacks. It's common sense here. So this is their get out clause. Oh, very clever. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They're able to.
Right. They don't
the
have
way
any
that the Health Secretary of State, Matt Hancock, and Chris Whitty, and all the rest of them talk about it on the telly, it's then twisted and manipulated by the media, which is then pushed onto private corporations and entities, and they then put the shop signs up saying, law to wear a face mask, because it's a bit like a big game of Chinese whispers, and they believe that's the right thing and what they've been told. But the government behind closed doors are saying, no, we haven't told you that, and that's their way to get out of it. But you see a big sign in the window saying it's law to wear one, you automatically believe it. That's the problem, and that's where we lie.
It pushes it, of course.
Yeah.
So if you don't do your own research, or we don't have great people like yourself, or people are moving on TV to give the knowledge, people are just they're not going to know what their rights are and what they can do and what they can't do. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Reading, this is brilliant. Thank you so much. Yes.
Part 2, it then talks about the exemptions. So part 2, it says, no person may, without a reasonable excuse, enter or remain within a relevant place. Now we've discussed what relevant places are, without wearing a face covering. And then it goes on to different things as to what classifies as a reasonable excuse. Now you've got children under the age of 11. So no child under the age of 11 has to wear one, but we're seeing mothers and fathers putting them on children, and it's ridiculous. There's a reason why children don't need to wear face masks, because their lungs are not fully formed, their immune system's not fully formed, so you shouldn't be subjecting them to less oxygen and increased carbon dioxide. Also, if you look at it from a different point of view, their brains aren't fully formed, and yet you're conditioning them that this is the right thing to do. So, yeah, children under 11. Also talks about people, if you're responsible for someone who needs to lip read, and other bits and bobs, if a police officer tells you to take it off, if you're an emergency first responder, but that stuff's not really relevant to most people watching this. The only one really that's relevant is children under 11. Then it goes on to talk about reasonable excuses. Now, under section 4.1a, it says, person cannot put on, wear, or remove a face covering, and then there's 2 reasons. Number 1 is because of any physical or mental illness or impairment or disability within the meaning of section 6 of the Equality Act 2010.
Wow.
So that,
okay. So they're saying that if you have a mental health issue or a serious physical issue, you don't have to have a face covering at all.
yes, that's exactly what they say. Like, the exact wording is because of any physical or mental illness or impairment or disability within the meaning of section 6 of the Equality Act 2010.
Which is the majority of the population. We've all got something going on with us.
Yeah. It then talks about what it says within the meaning of the Equality Act 2010. So that's when you need to know what it says in the Equality Act 2010. Otherwise, it's not relevant.
So do you know what it says? Do you
the Equality Act 2010, it says a person has a disability if they have a physical or mental impairment and the impairment has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on the person's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. So under that definition, right, say for example, I've got a bad knee. I've got a bad knee that classifies as class as a physical condition. It also has a substantial and long-term effect on my normal day-to-day activities because I need my knee to walk. So then that ticks the box, and then would then exempt me from wearing a face mask. That's how ridiculous it is.
Sorry to stop you there again, Matt.
You can get away.
You have to go to a doctor to prove this. Do you have to go to a doctor to get an exemption to prove this? Or can you just say that? Bad knee.
No, because under medical privilege and GDPR, which is basically data protection, no one has the right to ask you your medical history, basically. So it comes down to the assumption, if I say I've got a problem, and also if I said I've got a problem with a bad knee, you wouldn't really use that anyway. You kind of get putting yourself in murky waters there, really. But it just shows how ludicrous their legislation is, that a bad knee would allow me not to wear a face covering, which clearly shows it's not about wearing a face covering if I can get out of it for having a bad knee. But under medical privilege and GDPR, you do not need to explain your medical condition. So you could just say, you could lie and say, I have this condition, I have that condition, or you don't even need to tell them their condition. You can just say, I have a condition, because they can't ask you what it is.
Okay, that's wonderful news, because usually everything is run in this country. If you have to prove anything, like to get benefits or anything, if you want to claim anything for a disability or mental health issue, you have to go and see a doctor, you have to wait for weeks. So you're saying that literally on the spot, you can be exempt. If you say, I'm not well, or there's something wrong with me, you don't have to prove it to anyone. You just say it, and you're protected by this legislation.
Yeah, it's medical privilege. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone apart from your own medical practitioner. So yes, it's a bit of a grey area. I mean, you're saying you could completely misuse that and say, yes, I've got asthma, I've got COPD, or pleural effusion, or any other respiratory illness or disease, knowing full well that you can't be asked on it. But then that makes a mockery of their own legislation, that they allow you to do that.
Why have they done that, do you think?
Again, it's allowing the government basically loads of get out of jail free cards. We basically said you can use any medical or physical illness you want. You don't have to wear a face covering. And they basically say you don't even need to wear one if you know how to read this. So if you wear one, it's your own choice.
And they're aware that the media is going to twist everything around and scare the life out of everyone.
Exactly right.
So that's really, yeah.
That was
wow.
That was excuse one. Excuse two is person cannot put on, wear, or remove a face covering without severe distress. So that is completely subjective. You cannot quantify distress. What might distress me might not distress you. So basically it boils down to an opinion. If I say it distresses me to wear a face mask, I don't need to prove that like you would do with like a bad knee or asthma, because you cannot prove it. It's unquantifiable. What stresses me might not stress you. So again, it makes even more of a mockery of their own legislation. You can just turn around and say, no, sorry, I'm stressed out by wearing a face mask. And who isn't? Nobody's wearing a face mask stress-free. Nobody.
It's not natural, is it? It's not natural. It's not good for you. It will cause anxiety.
Yeah.
As you say, everyone is different, and some people may think they're going to be all right and they may not be. You know, it's not a good thing. We don't want it, but you're explaining it beautifully. So there's really nothing to worry about. Why are people running around like headless chickens fighting each other and standing there looking at you? If you go anywhere and you're not wearing one, they're prepared to annihilate you. This is because of the media and because of the fear mongering. So the government have protected themselves, and it's a really good thing when they do this, because it makes us all wake up and see what they're really getting up to.
Yeah, it's down to social conformity. If the manager of a shop tells you wear a mask, then you blindly follow because it's his shop. If a police officer tells you wear a mask, he's got a uniform, so you blindly follow. And even without a person interacting with you, you see an arrow on the floor, go this way, one way, you blindly comply. It's human psychology to just blindly comply to what we are told, because it's in our nature to trust the people that are telling us this to be in our best interest. But in this instance, it is not even close to in our best interest, but we still blindly just follow like sheep. And that is how they're able to perpetrate this ruse onto people, because they know we'll just comply without asking questions about it.
Okay, so just to summarize, no one has asked anybody to wear a mask. It's a face covering. That's the first thing.
Yep.
The second thing is that the majority of us have got some kind of disability, some kind of illness. Nearly every woman's got fibromyalgia. Everyone is suffering from anxiety or something because of all of this. So you very easily can say, I do not consent because this is going to make me ill. And that apparently is legal for you to do.
Yes, correct. And also, if it says, the fact that it says physical condition is nonsense, because how can I use a bad knee not to wear a mask? But you could under legislation if you knew how to argue it. But yes, if you've got a medical or physical condition that causes you long-term issues, then you can use that. But if you haven't, you can then just say, it causes me distress. And that's completely subjective and cannot be argued against. And that's what I use, I will use. I just walk into the shop and say, no, and just ignore them. But if I was stopped and further pushed, I would say it causes me distress. You cannot argue against my distress, because what stresses me might not stress you. So you can't base your empowering on my opinion. You can't do it. So yes, medical conditions, anything physical or mental, or the fact that it causes you distress. So like I said at the beginning of the video, every single person is exempt from wearing face covering. It is under those guidelines. And also nobody's, even in their own legislation, nobody's actually been asked to wear a mask. It's just a face covering.
This is incredible. All this crazy stuff that's going on Facebook about masks and nonsense, and no one's even been asked to wear one. This is incredible. Thank you so much for this. And the other thing I just wanted to summarize as well to people, you don't have to go to the doctor. You don't have to prove anything. You can just say, no, I'm not going to do it. I do not consent. And that's also very beautiful. So this is very positive. It's all very positive.
Yeah, it is. I understand people don't like being confronted. People don't just want to get on with their day. So people just go, oh, it's just a mask, just put it on. It's only half an hour in the shop. But people don't realize what it's setting the precedent for. It's only this, it's only that. What's coming next, basically.
Exactly.
And that's why people shouldn't consent, and they should stand up for their own rights, because at what point of your civil liberties and freedoms being taken away will you stand up for your rights? So although it's only little baby steps, those little baby steps will amount to something greater in the long run if you don't start standing up for yourself.
I agree 100%. Once they lock the whole world down, you've got to really start to take notice.
Yeah.
So much is coming out about that stuff, but let's stick with what we're talking about here. So this is all great news to give people that are confused, as I say, when they come on Facebook and say, okay, let's talk about the fine then. So the chances are you won't be fined if you're exempt. So get yourself exempt. So who can be fined then? Because it doesn't really make any sense, any of it.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. When we talk about here, it states that who can enforce this, basically, and it says a relevant person can enforce it. So again, what's a relevant person? And it says in here what a relevant person is. A relevant person is a constable, a police community support officer, a person designated by the Secretary of State, or a TFO officer, which is a Transport for London officer. Now, Transport for London officer is not really relevant unless you're on Transport for London. A person designated by the Secretary of State, I haven't got a clue who that is, but it's certainly not the security guard at Tesco's. So basically, the only people who can enforce this are the police, not the shop managers, not the security guards, only the police. But then the weird thing about it is, it says the police can enforce it and then fine you, but the police have no power over you if you're not breaking a law. So it's ridiculous. They're just, what the police do is, if you enter into a contract, a verbal contract, or you interact with the police and you agree with them, then they can then use their powers that way. If you know what you're standing up for and say, basically what you'd say to the police is, have I committed a crime? No. And then am I breaching the peace? No. Am I free to leave? Yes. And then you can just go on your way, basically, but you need to know what you're standing up for. They'll bully you, they'll coerce you, they'll try and say, oh, we'll fine you, etc. But they can't. And the weird thing is, also in this legislation, let me just find it, it says that all the police have the power to do is, I can't find the exact wording, but I know what it is, but all the police have the power to do is either A, ask you to leave that relevant place, or B, ask you to put on a face covering. That's the only powers they have.
Okay.
So they could say leave or put on a face covering.
Right. But you can exempt yourself.
But you then say, I'm exempt. So then you wouldn't have to. But even if they did say you have to leave, you could then leave, but they have no powers to arrest you, and they have no powers to fine you because you haven't committed a crime. So the whole thing's just lunacy.
Do you know what it reminds me of? All these, when you get a parking ticket from all these companies, and then if you don't get back to them, yada, yada, you know what I mean? You don't have to pay the parking tickets. They try it on. Okay, can you give me the link to this website? Because what if this website goes? We need to get hold of it now so we can get it out to everyone so people can print these off. Because, as I say, the government website in March, Martin, told us that this was not a contagious virus, and yet people didn't see that anywhere. They didn't,
Yeah.
and they probably can't find it now. Once people know about it, they probably wiped it. So what is this link?
I'm not sure I can tell you the whole link, 'cause it's probably quite long, but it is just if you were to type into Google, how I find it is I just type in coronavirus face coverings. That's what I type in, and at the top of the page on Google is the link, but it is the government.uk website where you have health regulations, face coverings. You've got the health regulations.
I've got it here. When to wear one and how to make your own. It's saying.
It's the government's own their own website, and you are right in what you say. The coronavirus was downgraded from highly infectious disease on the 19th of March, 4 days before we were locked down.
Exactly.
It's ludicrous, but
unbelievable.
The media push it onto people, push fear, panic, scaremongering, but then behind the scenes, the government is slowly retracting it, but we can't see it because all we see is what the telly tells us.
Okay, so I'm on this government, I'm on here now, and it says face coverings, when to wear one, how to make your own, 23rd of July 2020. Where do we find this, what you're talking about, this legislation? Where do we find it?
Let me just, I'll go on my other phone and I will.
I'm just going to pause a second. Brilliant. Okay, well, I've gone on there, and as I say, it doesn't say mask anywhere. It says face covering. That's the first thing. And I did listen to a lawyer. She went on this morning, I think, and she said the same thing. And I didn't watch it, but I don't know how far she got. But this is brilliant. So is there anything else, Martin, that you need to tell us? As I said, please use this program. Use it. If it gets taken off YouTube, please contact me. I'm moving on TV1@gmail.com. It will be in. It will be on an MP4 on my, and I will make sure that I have it. So you can use it wherever you want to send it around and use it as evidence that you are protected by legislation. Okay. So is there anything else you'd like to pass on to us?
It's purely, obviously, not everyone has the ability to argue. Not everyone has the courage to stand up for themselves. I understand that people just want to get on with their day, but they don't want to face confrontation. Also, when they're confronted by a security guard or manager or other people in masks, and they feel intimidated. So I would personally argue, because I know that legislation. However, other people, what I would recommend to them is you can get these hidden disability cards. You can order them online. You can also go on the government website and you can just screenshot it and you can use that. So if you don't want to get into a confrontation with people, you can just, there you go, and then you can get on with your day. Or you can just say, I'm medically exempt, I have asthma. You don't have to tell them, but it is just the key to open the door to get you in without being harassed, basically. People who are a bit stronger, a bit more knowledgeable will be able to say, like me, and just say no, because I will be able to argue it further. But people who can't or don't want to, flash your exemption card, say you got asthma, and in you go, basically. Well, you should do anyway, unless you're confronted by mini Hitlers on the door, in which case, unless you know what you're talking about, then you are going to struggle and come unstuck. But from what I've heard so far, people that are just flashing their lanyards or flashing their exemption cards or just saying I'm medically exempt have been free to get along with their day. So if people that are not sure, I would just say, why not just try saying I'm medically exempt? Because what's the worst that will happen? All they'll say to you, if they don't believe you, what's the worst that will happen? You'll just have to put a mask on, which you were going to do anyway. So why not just try it? Why not try and push back against a system that's trying to control you? Just give it a try. You've got nothing to lose, basically.
Exactly. But you have got rights. You have got rights.
Yeah, you've got rights.
And it's interesting that the government did this to protect themselves, but they always shoot themselves in the foot, and more people wake up because of this. They're also not very clever. They've got they haven't got any common sense. And that's why we're going to be winning. They don't have any common sense at all.
They're relying on the stupidity, basically, the naivety, the ill education, and the conformity of people to just, that's how they're able to perpetrate this, because basically people don't know, don't want to know, can't be bothered to know, or just blindly follow. That's how they're able to do this, because they know that that's how people work.
Okay, so just to summarize again, the beginning of March, before they locked us down, they actually confirmed on the government website that this was a non-contagious virus. They degraded it and they still locked us down. Point one. Second point is they never mention masks anywhere. Only the media mentions masks. It's face covering. So you could do this with your hands and you're covering your face, and you're not, as long as you're covering your nose, you can wear a scarf. But if you don't want to, you can go and you can get an exemption card for being in distress, having a physical condition. Anything you feel is going to put you under duress is legal for you to say no. Okay?
Yep.
Confirm that today, and that is beautiful. So how do people get in touch with you, Martin? If they want to talk to you or they want to contact you, do you have a page about this? Or
I do have a page, and maybe you'll link my Facebook page underneath in this video somewhere, because obviously if you just search my name, you'll probably come up with 50 different people and never actually find me.
Okay, so what's the best place to find you?
Well, my Facebook page is Martin May, but obviously there's going to be a lot of Martin Mays to look for. But at the moment, I can't do much on it because I'm 4 days into a 30-day ban. So,
they'll contact you through us, basically. They can contact you through movingontv1@gmail.com. If you want to get in touch with Martin, I can put you through to him. And is that okay?
You can still have me as a friend, and you can still message me. Messenger, I'm still allowed to reply on Messenger, so it still works. Obviously, I have a lot of people messaging me, and I can't reply to everybody, so please don't be offended if I don't reply to you, or all my reply is just a thumbs up emoji, because it's difficult to keep on top of everybody who wants to know every bit of information. But that's why I make videos, so I can try and push the information that way, rather than individually interacting with people.
Do you have a separate, but you don't have like a separate page about this that people can go on and communicate and connect to each other?
No, I don't. Basically, people like to separate business and personal, but at the end of the day, this is the same thing. There is no business if we don't sort this out, basically. So I'm happy for my personal Facebook to be my voice. I don't need to separate it from anything else, because if we don't sort this, there won't be any personal life. There won't be any business life. So I'm happy for my Facebook.
Humanity anymore. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all but the good news is we're all coming together. We've got such wisdom in us. We're all becoming lawyers and journalists and researchers, and it's beautiful. We've got it in us, and I'm so grateful to have you on here. And thank you so much. I'll go put this on the news flash, so it'll go out straight away all over the place. So thank you so much, anyone who's watching this. I hope this calms you down a little bit, and I hope it helps you to be able to understand a little bit more of what's going on. And thank you so much, Martin, for coming on to Moving On TV. We need many more people like yourself. And as I say, we're growing. Is there anything else that you want to say just before we finish? Anything else to add?
No, other than I thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to use my voice and my knowledge to speak to other people, and I'm hoping other people can listen to what I have to say, and hopefully that can change their mind and their thought process, so they can hopefully change their lives. But yeah, thank you for giving me the platform, the opportunity to give me the opportunity to speak and for other people to listen to.
You're welcome. And thank you so much. Take care now. Have a beautiful day and enjoy wherever you are.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.